You ever wake up to birds chirping, stretch, yawn, and then realize your entire family cabin has been wrapped in barbed wire like it's a military outpost? That was me last Saturday morning. And the kicker? A laminated note zip-tied to the fence that read, "This property now falls under POA jurisdiction. No unauthorized entry." It was signed in cursive, complete with a little heart next to the name. At first, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. But I knew one thing for sure: Margot Winslow had just tangled with the wrong family. Because the cabin she tried to fence off? It belonged to my father, and my father just happened to be the chief of staff to the governor of this great state. Our cabin was never meant to be part of any war. It had been in our family for decades, tucked away deep in the pines past where GPS gives up and nature takes over. It was where Dad went to breathe and where I learned how to track deer, bait a hook, and chop wood without losing a toe. It was sacred ground to us. Untouched. Peaceful. Until the POA decided it was ripe for conquest. It all started a few months back when luxury homes started springing up about a mile down the mountain. The development called itself Stone Hollow Estates, complete with granite mailboxes, decorative fountains, and the inevitable horror, a property owners association. From the moment they moved in, I knew trouble would follow. But I wasn't prepared for how fast it escalated. I'd gone up there for the weekend to do some maintenance, clear out the gutters, fire up the generator, make sure the attic wasn't hosting a raccoon rave. That's when I saw her. A woman in a tennis visor and neatly pressed khakis, piloting a pastel green golf cart like it was an armored vehicle. Her face wore the smug expression of someone who thought the earth belonged to her by divine right. She didn't introduce herself. Just asked, "You the one squatting here?" I blinked. "This is private property," I told her. "Been in our family for 30 years. She didn't flinch. Just whipped out a rolled-up map like she was casting a spell and pointed to a vaguely shaded rectangle. "This area was recently included in the POA jurisdictional realignment," she said, as if that meant anything at all. She called herself President Winslow, but I'd learned later her real name was Margot, because of course it was. She rattled off a list of supposed violations: unauthorized camping, improper sanitation, unregistered structure maintenance. I almost laughed. Our cabin was grandfathered in long before the Stone Hollow development broke ground, and the nearest paved road was 5 minutes of dirt and gravel away. "I'll be following up," she chirped, then spun the cart around like she'd just conducted a tactical raid and zipped back down the trail. I figured it was a one-off. Maybe she'd come back with cookies and an awkward apology. Instead, I woke up the next morning to find the entire perimeter wrapped in barbed wire. Not just the driveway, every edge of our property. Signs everywhere. Private POA land. Trespassers will be fined. Dad's truck, which I'd parked near the trail, had a yellow parking boot slapped on the front wheel. There had been no hearing, no notice. Just steel, warnings, and enough laminated plastic to start an office supply store. I took photos. Lots of them. Then texted Dad with a caption: "So the cabin's been seized by a suburban warlord. Also, she drives a mint green golf cart." 5 minutes later, he called. Not panic, just that low, deliberate tone he used when someone was about to have a very bad week. "She leave a name?" he asked. "Margot Winslow," I said. "Claims to be the POA president." There was a long pause. Then a simple, "Oh boy." See, my dad's not the kind to throw his weight around. Most people don't even know the governor's chief of staff by name. That's how he likes it. No spotlight. Just power, quietly wielded. But when someone messes with the only peaceful place he has left, he doesn't just make calls, she makes earthquakes. Still, I wasn't about to just sit and wait. I needed to figure out what kind of lunatic thought she could annex private property like it was a bake sale dispute. So I headed into Stone Hollow to investigate. Margot's POA headquarters turned out to be her oversized McMansion, retrofitted with a gazebo, a towering flagpole, and enough ring cameras to rival the Pentagon. Out front, she was barking orders to a man who looked like he'd been rejected by mall security. His name was Kurt. He wore a tactical vest with nothing in it and a walkie-talkie strapped to his chest like he was awaiting battlefield intel. Margot spotted me immediately and launched into a tirade about respecting POA regulations. I hadn't even stepped onto her lawn. She pointed to a binderies, a literal binder labeled "Cabin Offenders Class B Encroachments." "You made a file on us?" I asked. She smiled. "This is legal. The community agrees." That's when I realized she really believed she could shove us off our land with a title, a clipboard, and a map she probably printed from Google. Back at the cabin, I stared at the wire fencing like it was some kind of post-apocalyptic art exhibit. And then I smiled. What Margot didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that behind every POA fantasy is a reckoning waiting to happen. And hers? It was about to arrive, delivered by the governor's right-hand man. Margot didn't run a community. She ran a cult. Stone Hollow looked peaceful from the outside, but under the surface? It was a dictatorship built on newsletters, garden gnome ordinances, and enough fines to fund a small country. I wasn't surprised when I found out she held weekly emergency meetings. What surprised me was the turnout, dozens of residents sipping cucumber water like they were attending a classified briefing. Margot stood center stage, microphone clipped to her collar, flanked by Kurt and another clipboard. She projected a map onto a screen. In red ink, she'd circled our cabin and labeled it illegally occupied zone. Beside it, the word squatter. She claimed our cabin was a threat to community aesthetics and said it may be harboring unapproved wildlife. Like it was a Jurassic Park situation. I raised my hand. Margot glared, but nodded. So just to clarify, I said, you're calling a legally deeded, state-owned family cabin a threat to your neighborhood because it doesn't match your paint palette? A few people chuckled. Kurt stepped forward like he was about to conduct a citizen's arrest with his empty utility vest. Margot snapped, this is not a debate forum. If you wish to appeal, you'll need to submit Form 37B, 2 copies of your deed, and pass a visual inspection for aesthetic compliance. I remembered something Dad once said. Never argue with someone who decorates their mailbox seasonally. It's not worth your breath. So I didn't argue. I smiled. Because the next move wasn't mine. It was his. When I got back to the cabin, Dad was already there, sipping coffee on the porch like a man holding a full house. So, he said, nodding to the barbed wire, this is what counts as hospitality around here? I nodded. She held a whole rally. Called you a squatter. Accused you of attracting rogue squirrels. He laughed. Then his expression hardened. Let's begin. What followed was a flurry of quiet Calsto zoning offices, legal advisors, and a state liaison who actually laughed out loud when she heard the words barbed wire and POA jurisdiction. By sundown, the gears of state-level justice had started to turn. But Margot wasn't done. If anything, she escalated. 2 days later, I came back to find the power cut. Generator lines slashed. A new notice pinned to the door, unauthorized utility usage. Cease immediately. She'd convinced someone that our line to the state transformer was illegal siphoning. Kurt, meanwhile, had upgraded from clipboard to headset. I caught him whispering into it like he was tailing a spy, perimeter secure. Target hasn't moved. Dad didn't get mad. He got meticulous. He photographed everything. Recorded everything. He built a file labeled POA Overreach Exhibit A. Margot started distributing newsletters titled Defending Our Borders. She called us outsiders with unclear intentions. Warned residents to report any non-community individuals. To counter her nonsense, I started posting online. Just the facts. A few pictures. A little sarcasm. The internet loved it. One clip of Kurt falling into his own barbed wire fence while trying to reinstall it got over 2 million views. The comments were brutal. Memes rolled in. One had Kurt photoshopped into a battlefield with the caption, "When you try to protect HOA property but forget physics." Reporters started calling. One local paper ran a headline, "The Pines War, Family Cabin vs. POA Queen." Margot freaked. Issued a cease and desist. Claimed we were manipulating public perception. But we weren't manipulating anything. We were just showing people who she really was. And she handled the rest.